Hello, everyone. It's Martha Burgess Novak. This is a show called Real Talk with Martha Burgess Novak because we don't mince words here, do we? Those of you that have tuned in before, for those of you that are new, welcome. We talk about consciousness here. We talk about how to implement that in our daily lives. And we've been doing a series, and this is the last of it, called Cognitive Distortions and What You Do About Them in terms of consciousness. So we learn about the cognitive distortions, and then we ask two questions. The first question is, what's really the truth beyond the distortion that our egoic child's mind created? And the second question is, then what are you going to do instead of going through that old door of that specific cognitive distortion? Well, hello, Lisa. Those of you that are on Blog Talk Radio, when you hear me acknowledging people, it's because people are speaking to me from Facebook Live. And I'm just delighted to always hear from you, my dear. So thank you so much for tuning in. And all of you that are tuning in, we got quite a few messages as I was writing our little blurb saying we're about to go on the air. And thank you so much for all of those, for your saying hello, for your suggestions about the show. And do please check out my website. And by the way, on my website, marthaburgessnovak.net, there are some very easy portals to get to the live show. We've tried to make it as easy as possible because, quite frankly, it's been hard. And I've had to be sending out to my mailing list until my darling Jim Sadler, who is such a genius in IT, made it easier for us. I've been having to send out links to the specific live show. Now, I also want to say that we have all the live shows, all the shows that I've ever done, archived on Blog Talk Radio and on Facebook Live, and they're also all posted to YouTube. So they're all over, and they're on a variety of subjects: money, relationships, what love is, stress, you name it. Everything that is in this aging, in this world today, we've done a show about and continue to do so. All right. Let's do a prayer, get us all on the same page, and then we're going to launch into the show. All right? Got some important things to tell you today, and stay tuned till the end of the show because I'm going to tie why we did this series all together. And then it is going to take us into a very fast discussion of what we're going to talk about next week in detail. It may be the beginning of another series. So I want you to stay tuned because I'm about to tell you something by the end of the show that is very important for your life as a human being living in this world, as a studier of consciousness, and as a very loving person who wants to add value to the world. All right, let's do our prayer, get ourselves on the same page, and then we'll launch into our material. Let me say one more thing, and that is, if I lose you on one of these feeds, Blog Talk Radio or Facebook Live, go immediately to my page, marthaburgessnovak.net, and go into the other portal so you don't lose the show. Okay? Sometimes it's wonderful and everything works, and sometimes it does not. So we want to make sure that you have access to the information, no matter what. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are, and all everything is in this world, we thank you so much for our being here together under the banner, one banner, of finding out who you are to us and finding out who we are in relationship to the ascended God that we are. We are the aspect of that in us, and we're all knowing that we will be happier and better off if we cooperate with it. But there are many things in the way because that's what human beings do before they find their way home. We thank you so much, dear God, for all this information. And we open ourselves now to see, hear, sense, and know what you would have us do as we open to the truth that lies in your enlightenment. We give up right now for these 90 minutes knowing anything to say it is the you through us and through all things that know it all. And we give ourselves to that. Thank you so much, dear God. And we say this prayer now in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of everyone listening to the show. Excuse me, and that's the end of the prayer. I was distracted because Kat said, "Good morning, are you in the dark?" At least I can hear you. Well, hang on a minute. I'm going to pull, I don't know why I'm in the dark, but let me pull light further closer to me. And we'll see if, well, oh, there we go. You let me know, Kat, if that's a little better. Okay? I hope it is. And Kat said, "Lisa, can you still see her?" So you guys have a little conversation. Let me know if you need me to do something else here, okay? Now, going to our subject. And guys, this is a live show today, so please feel free to be one of our guests. The guest call-in number is 347-850-1647. Now, that's the call-in number. And, you know, if you want to just listen to the show, use one of the portals on the website, marthaburgessnovak.net. I'm a .net, not a .com. All right, so this list is not my own, although I've worked with it. It says, "No, my screen is completely dark." Kat, I don't know what's happening. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I haven't heard from Lisa to know whether the screen is dark on her end. And I am going to pull this closer, and we'll hope for the best. So I don't really know what's going on technically here. But then again, you know me, because we're old friends. I never know what's going on technically. I'm just doing the best I can here. Okay. So I'm going to keep talking, and you guys let me know what else you need from me, because I did pull the light over. I don't know whether you could even see me at all, but the light is reflected in the glasses. Now, my friend Karen, who is out west, says, "I can see you just fine." Thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate you letting me know. So, Kat, I don't know what's happening on your end. I think I'm being seen on some people's screen. All right, thank you. She says it's okay as long as I can hear you. All right, aren't you sweet? Here we go. You're not missing anything by not seeing me. I'll tell you that. These days, not at all. All right, here we go. This was a list. It isn't my list, although I've been working with these things for many years with people. This is not my list that I have created of cognitive distortions. This is a woman named Alice Boyes. Alice Boyes apparently wrote an article for Psychology Today, and she listed the 50 most common cognitive distortions. Alice Boyes, we thank you very much for writing this. Now, as usual, with all of life, when we work with what we work with here, consciousness and enlightenment, we give it a spin. We give it a spin beyond what it is, because these are, if you will, I always use this image. I hope it's a good one for you. It is for me. We have these doors. I'm calling these cognitive distortions doors. So when a certain set of circumstances remind us of our childhoods where these cognitive distortions were created based on appearances, because that's all that the little child's brain can comprehend, they discern all sorts of things about life, about themselves, about their mothers, their fathers, about family in general, about brothers and sisters, about whether people are trustworthy, other people, God, dogs and cats, and everything else in the world. They discern what they think about them based on appearances. There's another factor here, and the other factor is that we start out as one cell. one cell. And that cell has a lot of stress coming into it about growth and change, right? It's interpreted by the cell as stress. So it starts vibrating. You can actually see this under a microscope. And then the cell divides into two cells that can handle that amount of stress and still more. And yet the stress gets to them and they divide or die. Because of this cellular experience, this is why we interpret all of life, because we're cellular beings, as pleasure helps us live, pain threatens us about dying. Okay, this is the cellular thing. This is why we freak out when something hurts until we realize, well, pain's just part of life and we've got to get used to it and we can do something about it if we catch it early enough, and we go on, right? All right. So you've got a cellular system that contributes to all of this that we've just talked about, to your interpretation of life. And because of that, then you add some emotional things that happen to you in life. I don't care if you even had a great childhood. It doesn't matter. You still learn these same lessons of being human, and you've got some cognitive distortions to get through. Now, going back to these cognitive distortions, we've got to define the doors. You've got to know the doors you're going into, because many of these doors are layered on top of each other. So you don't just have an event that happens in your life. You go through a door and you layer this, you go through another door, you layer that, and you get all these emotional layers on top of it. So it's not just what happened anymore. You got all this stuff built up where you built it up against the self or against other people. You've got distortions about what really happened. Now, this leads to the question, is everything good or bad? It's not either. It's both. And really, good and bad is a word from the ego child's mind. I want you to realize that in these cognitive distortions, you're very much believing in bad, that something bad can happen to you, because all of these are protections of the self, you see? And I want you to ask yourself, are you going to believe that? Do you want to believe that something bad can happen, or do you believe that everything's good and there are wonderful things to learn and grow from and opportunities to be had, open the mind, the heart, the very being in everything that happens? I happen to believe the latter. I hope you will too one day, if not now. Okay. That said, we went through a series of cognitive distortions last week. I'm not going to read them right now. I thought I might, but I'm not, because I'll tell you what I want to do toward the end of the session, because I've only got about 7 points to get through today. I'm going to go back and I'm going to read every single one of these again. I'm not going to explain them. I'm just going to read them so they're fresh in your mind, because I have something, as I referred to earlier, something absolutely incredible to tell you about them. And I think you're going to put this all in perspective and you're going to go, I get it. I absolutely get it. Yesterday, the getting it was really proved in my classes. And I'm going to tell you something that happened. A lot of times when I am creating curriculum, I'm told to do an exercise here or an exercise there. I'm told by Spirit what the result will be, and I've learned through the years to absolutely trust that. So that's what I did. I did an exercise with them, and wow. So I'm going to share that with you because it has everything to do with you. So stay tuned. Okay, let's go in to our work today. Number 43. And by the way, I want you to know that I had... Oh, hi, Pat. Oh, my video keeps pixelating. I'm seesawing between you and MTP this AM. I don't know what MTP is. I'm so sorry. Oh, aren't you sweet? He says I'm cuter than Chuck Todd, I guess, on MTP. Well, cheers and enjoy your day too, Pat. Thank you so much, sweetheart. I'm always thrilled to hear from you, your friend I don't see nearly often enough. Okay, going back to work. Number 43 is the peak end rule. This is the tendency to most strongly remember, number one, how you felt at the end of an experience. Think of what happened in your childhood, okay? And two, how you felt at the moment of peak emotional intensity during the experience. And she goes on to say that biased memories can lead to biased future decision making. I happen to agree with her. I think this is absolutely true. Now, I've seen this quite a lot in clients through the years. They get hung up on how they felt in certain experiences. And here's the damaging part. Because they are remembering, number one, how they felt at the end of the experience, and number two, how they felt in the moment of peak intensity, they don't leave the moment. This defines what a fixation is. A fixation, and it doesn't have to be conscious, keep in mind. None of these things have to be conscious. That's the reason we're talking about these, to bring them to consciousness. We want you to see what you're doing, because only when you see what you're doing, whether you like it or not, there's a choice in there to do it again or not. You see? We want to get you to choice beyond reaction, because these things are knee-jerk reactions. You have a certain set of circumstances, you go through a certain door, you go through another door and another door and another door that all have to do with the same experience, and you set these up in your childhood, and we as adults do them again and again and again. Okay? We can't be hung up on childhood thinking and the sorrow and the fear and the anxiety and the social awkwardness and the disgust and the hatred and the blame and the self-blame and the self-attack that was back there. The childhood's brain simply cannot understand the intricacies that are happening in life. Your brain doesn't even start developing until in your 20s. The reason you are the age you are and are interested in this is because you're ready for a more global view of what happened to you. That means we can't keep indulging in these things, these fixations that happened in the past. I mean, this is an easy thing to say, hard thing to realize and to bring yourself forward into the present. But the past is over and the future hasn't come. So the only dynamic place, the only conscious place, and the only place that you create a different reality is right here, right now. And you say, well, I don't like what here, right now. God is obviously not listening to me, that I want something more. And I'm saying, no, you're not listening. Forgive me for saying so, but you're not listening to a higher self that tells you how to get out of that. We shut it off to deal with the same old patterns, the same old things, the same old peek-in rules that we did when we were younger. Thank you for that, heart. I appreciate it with all my heart. So, what is the truth about this? Well, I've been talking it. The truth is you're much more than those moments. Hello, Angela. Oh, yeah. Angela just shared that God is always on standby. It's absolutely true. But it doesn't have to be. It can be invite it into your life. And I do want to say, if you're new to me, don't be offended by the word God. To me, it's not an old man on a throne. It is energy. And it is the energy of what we are unless we distort it, you see? Good morning, Angela. And so we have to think beyond the ego child's mind. Now, you keep in mind the ego child's mind is fear-based, anxiety-ridden. It sees very narrowly, okay? Very narrowly. It sees the problem. It sees what's wrong, never sees what's right, sees very little of what's right. It's full of self-attack, even in a subtle way. All right? It's entirely self-indulgent. But there is another mind in you too. And I'm not talking about the brain here. I'm talking about the mind. There is an ego child's mind, and then there is a higher self mind. The higher self mind sees everything in context. It sees everyone's, where everyone is coming from. It knows that everybody's got agendas, and you have yours. And the whole point of life is to see how we can all work together and make sure that everybody is happy. Yes, that's the conscious mind. And, here's the interesting thing. Consciousness, the word consciousness, can be a capital C, or it can be a little c. We all have consciousness. The person right now that, God forbid, is murdering somebody on the street in a downtown city has consciousness. It's just is it higher consciousness. So what I tend to do is capitalize when I'm talking about higher consciousness. If you all have read my books, The Life You Want and The Teacup Prophecies, you will often see, if I'm referring to God, if I'm referring to the highest self, I'm often capitalizing words like love and consciousness. I'm just going to put that on the table because, I want us to be very specific with our language. Okay. So there's consciousness and higher consciousness. Sometimes you use the same word for both. So the truth of the matter is that we are much more than this one moment. That we have given this one moment or these two moments too much importance and neglected other parts of our life like our potential that could take us forward. And it's time to change that now. When you were a child, up until 7 or 8 years old, your job was to stay alive. Your ego and your ego child's mind that formed their ideas of the world, and by the way, the ego child's and the ego child's mind didn't begin until it was 18 months old. That's the accepted time that this came forth from you. And the reason it came forth was enough bad things had happened to you, interpreted as bad, thank you, Angela, that you had to have a defense. So here comes the ego and the ego child's mind that says, gosh, we've got to find a device that scans the future for terrible things that reminds me of the past. So the future and the past are the same thing to the ego. And what it does to the ego child's mind, and what it does is it keeps you out of the present. The present is the only dynamic place to connect with friends, to be loving, to be generous, to be even altruistic, to feel God in full cooperation with it, to make money, to have incredible ideas that are going to transform your life, to make decisions. This moment is very important. All right? It's the place you manifest from. And that moment has to be real. Can't be fantasy. Can't be distorted in any way. And that's why we're talking about it now. So what are you going to do instead of fixating on the peek in rule? What are you going to do instead? Well, if I were you, when something happens in the world that triggers you like that. And how do you know if you're triggered? Because I say a lot of this is conscious and subconscious. You don't even know it's gone by. Here's the real way you tell. you feel bad. You feel anxious, or you feel fearful, or you're really angry, or you're defensive. If you hear any of those things or more coming out of your mouth that don't belong to the highest self, which is your true nature, you can darn well make sure, you can know that that's a cognitive distortion. And I'd look, particularly in this case, with the Pekin rule, you see? So what do you do instead? I think real communication is wonderful. So what I would do is go right to the person that I'm trying to misunderstand. And I'm saying to them, I'm trying to interpret that as an uncaring statement. Can you tell me what you really mean by that? Can you communicate with me where you're coming from when you say something like that to me? It's not a challenge, it's really a question. And it honors the other person because you're willing to give the benefit of the doubt. Now, this happens in relationships, it happens in business, it happens all over. Give the benefit of the doubt. Go ask. Find out what all the things are that you're not seeing. And what often happens with the Pekin rule is you've got a personalization going on. It's all about you. They don't like you. Something's wrong with you. You didn't do your work well enough. Something's wrong. Well, if you personalize it, and that was one of the first things that we talked about in this series, is how everything, we personalize things instead of just finding out. Go find out. Ask some questions. Be honest about where you're trying to come from and say, I'd rather not come from there if that's not true. If you like me and you're just trying to help me, then I need to know that. What we do in the ego child's mind is we try to avoid all of these 50 tactics that I've talked about are avoidance issues, you see? We run away instead of finding out the truth. You decided that you were to blame, possibly, in this terrible experience that you had, and you know what that felt like. But you've never asked yourself, is that appropriate to feel that way? Because let me tell you, a 4-year-old, a 6-year-old, is pretty innocent. Very little is their fault in the way that we often beat ourselves up for. Okay. So you're going to ask, you're going to talk, you're going to communicate. You're going to have an emotional language to do this. Now, one of the things I haven't said in a while, but I'm going to say to you now, is for God's sake, get on the internet. There are many, many lists of emotions. Try to find the longest one you can. We need to get you more fluid in your emotional language. This is a great way to start. It's the way I always start my people. Okay? Get an emotion list and print it out. You keep in mind that in consciousness there are only 2 emotions, but everything falls into those 2 emotions. It's either a fear-based emotion or a love-based emotion. There isn't anything else. The fear-based emotions are coming from the ego child's mind. The love-based emotions are coming from the highest self, the aspect of the ascended God you are. Both of these things are you. And our journey in consciousness, our journey to self that results in consciousness, is when we go from the fear-based self to the love-based self. What are the means? Well, I don't know. Look at all the different lives we have out there, all the diversity, all the different thoughts and feelings. But we really are going to the same place, no matter what we choose. We are happier if we get to that more conscious place in our lives, and as early as possible when our brains can understand this higher thought and this esoteric journey. But you won't be able to take your ego with you into death. It dies around the same time